All right, welcome back. So we're gonna just spend a little bit of time introducing what a histogram is and how it's kind of used as a graph for just looking at a single quantitative variable of interest. And so I'm on the third page of our data exploration note packet set. So this is section 2. The first couple pages kind of just give a table of contents and kind of just do a little brief outline of this baseball data set, which we'll be using a lot throughout the rest of the handout. But for now, we're just going to consider this question. And so the question kind of stems from, I guess, a discussion that a friend and I had a while back about how much money you'd be willing to pay to see your favorite either band or artist or musician in concert, and you get to choose their entire set list, meaning you get to choose all of the songs that they play and the order that they play them in. For the sake of kind of drawing a reasonable histogram and out of fairness, we're going to suppose that in our bank account, we have a maximum of $420. And so that's all we could spend on this. That's all we have in our bank. Maybe we have a little bit of extra for food and rent or whatever. But so max 420, that's kind of your spending money. How much of it do you spend to go to this concert where you get to pick the entire set list? Okay. And so if we were to actually collect data from a sample of people, so you might imagine kind of in maybe like a classroom setting, and if we were to kind of go around the room and ask people how much they'd be willing to pay to do this, what we're going to do is put cost on the x-axis in dollars. And then what we're going to end up doing is putting each person's response into these discrete bins. And so the bins that I'm going to use are going to be spaced by 60. So 60, 60 to 120, 120 to 180, 180 to 240, 240 to 300, 300 to 360, and 360 to 420. And so how a histogram is constructed is you would kind of maybe take the first person in your data set. And on the y-axis, I'm going to put a count. And so let's say the first person in your data set said they would spend $270. And so I'm going to raise up this first bin to a height of 1. Since 270 is between 240 and 300. Let's say the second person said they would spend 320. And so now this bin gets raised to a height of 1. And then we'll say the third person said maybe 250. And so this bin is now increasing so that it's got a height of 2. And then just to kind of speed things up here, we'll say the next person said they would just spend 30, then maybe the max of 420, then another 30, and then maybe 100. And so it looks like this. The 230s go into this bin, the 420 goes into this bin, and then the 100 goes into the 60 to 120 bin. And so then the final product, so this is just a sample size of 7, so our histogram doesn't really extend that high. But what you would end up seeing in the end is you would just draw horizontal lines at the top of each bin, and this would kind of be the final histogram that you see. Somewhat similar to the final histogram in this baseball example. And so the histogram, you might notice that we just kind of chose these bins just kind of arbitrarily. So in this case, there's 7 different bins because there's kind of 7 different spots where these observations can fall. But we don't have to choose 7 bins, so we might change our bins to 12. And we're not actually going to redraw the histogram here, but we're instead just going to make a note that changing the number of bins can slightly change the appearance of the histogram. So if we use 12 bins instead, there would be more kind of bins on this x-axis and you'd kind of get a finer scale. If we decrease the number of bins to maybe 4, then you would just have 4 different bins on this x-axis and you'd get a bit of a kind of coarser scale for our first histogram. Okay, so that's about it on creating a histogram from scratch. This will be the only time that we actually create the histogram from scratch. Otherwise, it'll be presented to you, or later in the semester, you'll use R to make one. And so most of the time, we'll just kind of start with the histogram, but hopefully that kind of gives you some insight into how to read it, since we know exactly how it's being built. All right. Next, we'll kind of talk about different histogram shapes and kind of how those might affect our common quantities of center, like the mean and the median.